esteemed guests, Sir Minure.
So I'm getting my steps in by going up and down these stairs tonight. So great pleasure to introduce our keynote speaker this evening, who's Roland, who's Chief Executive of Cambridge University Hospital Trust. From March 2023 until early 2025, he was the NHS England National Director of Life Sciences. And he, as part of this, he chaired the Innovation Ecosystem Program. The Innovation Ecosystem Report was published in autumn 2024, and many of the recommendations from that report are making their way into the new NHS 10-year plan and the National Life Sciences Sector Strategy. So Roland, thank you so much for agreeing to give your keynote address, and we look forward to hearing from you.
Ladies and gentlemen, please welcome Roland, Chief Executive at Cambridge University Hospitals
in the Best
NHS
Pharmaceutical
Foundation
Product
Trust.
category, the candidates are
So ladies and gentlemen, Mynheer Bruno, a huge thank you to all of you for giving me the privilege to come and talk to you this evening. I was very moved and very grateful to be able to spend a good part of the day today at the forum just through that wall in the Science Museum, and to hear Tony from GlaxoSmithKline talking about his vision of the future, June, to hear your chairing of the panel into rare diseases, and Andrew, many congratulations for coming off the bench at such short notice to chair your panel into obesity and the potential that sits there. I think that sits as a very powerful grounding for all of us for what is very clearly a moment in time. And it's a moment that the people in this room will either seize or will unfortunately let slip through their fingers. I'm going to give you a little bit of a perspective of where we are today and how we collectively see the future. And we're going to do that from the perspective of the national picture, but primarily from my office at the heart of the Cambridge Biomedical Campus, which is one of the largest clusters that we have in Europe. Within 1,000 meters of my office, in any particular day, I could walk you to Red Cross Lane, and I could introduce you to an 85-year-old lady with COPD, not really able to breathe, with serious diabetes, struggling to get out in the sun that we had last week because social care has not been able to put in the ramp that will get her walker out to let her get out and enjoy the sun with her family. I could also show you the enormous pressures in the NHS, in our health and care system, in a very busy emergency department. I could take you 1,000 meters from my office and introduce you to a colleague in general practice, a physician, facing an enormous demand in mental and physical health. I can also walk 1,000 yards towards the new railway station to have a cup of coffee with Jan Lowe, who runs the Laboratory of Molecular Biology, to have a conversation about the MD PhD program we're going to put in place across the university, the NHS, and the Laboratory of Molecular Biology. And Jan will talk to me about the connectome, about the mapping of the brain, the wiring diagram that will be a central underpinning piece of our neurosciences journey. And he'll say that's possible now at this moment in time because of the enormous advances in imaging and the advances in computing power to be able to make those steps that we have so far from worm to fly, in due course to mouse. And then back in the hospital and in the health and care system, I have enormous hope. I can go and chat to Raj Jenner about his work in radiotherapy planning with Microsoft and with the University of Cambridge that has shattered the time it took a consultant to do radiotherapy planning for cancer treatment. I could walk with you and chat to Jean Abraham, whose work in the university and in the health and care system in breast cancer, sequencing every single breast cancer tumor, has changed the treatment for those patients in 40% of cases, enabling targeted chemotherapy as just one example. But I suppose what I'm most excited to see is the work that we're doing with our patients and with our citizens around how they interact with the health and care system, with our industry partners, and with our colleagues in everything from discovery science through to translational medicine, in terms of keeping people well and intervening in a way that's tailored to them when they're poorly. At the very prosaic level, our virtual ward program, our monitoring of our communities with diabetes are just two examples. But in Cambridge, committed to changing care for patients and economic growth, we feel we're trying to catch that falling knife. We're at a moment of maximum opportunity and maximum peril. And that led us to want to step into the space of working with many of the people in this room as to how we could make the national UK life sciences ecosystem much, much better. This is a piece of work that a management consultant could have done in 8 weeks. But we very clearly determined to work on this over an 18-month period together, really in the spirit of collaboration with all of the partners around the table. I was delighted to be joined by Sam, the Chief Executive of NICE, June from MHRA. I'm not sure if Sue Hill is here from Genomics. I saw her on the list earlier on. Sue, are you here? No? And many other colleagues, Richard Torbett from the Association of British Pharmaceutical Industries, Steve from BIA, I could go on. Lucy Chappell from our research infrastructure nationally. And the question for us is, how do we work together as a community, as an ecosystem, to come up with recommendations for the future? Where do we have leadership? Where do we have the ideas? And Sharon Peacock, one of the judges for tonight, led COG UK at the same time as being a non-executive director, supporting me and challenging me in appropriate ways on the board of Cambridge University Hospitals. And that drive and mission in COVID to sequence COVID, to let us track the way that that condition evolved, is exactly the sort of mindset we wanted to bring. So for an 18-month period of multiple roundtables, interactions with patients, with charities, multiple interviews, we came to 4 groupings of recommendations as to how we could make this ecosystem better. First and foremost of those 4 is getting the wiring, the plumbing, the architecture right underneath. And what do I mean by that? By that I mean data, I mean clinical trials infrastructure, I mean passporting. When one thing is agreed in one place, it can be agreed and commissioned elsewhere. It's the guts of how these systems work and thrive. But when I say data, I don't mean just data. I mean, who is the data controller in a local general practice with a population of 50,000, and how can we ensure that that data is coming through to enable colleagues in industry and the university to work together in a very different way? When I talk about clinical trials, and Duncan, who is both Oxford and Cambridge, is leading an enormously important piece of work for us in Cambridge around how we get both early and late stage clinical trials at the absolute top of the game. The second block of 4 recommendations related to people. They related to culture. They related to giving time to clinicians and academics to really explore the questions that will bend the curve on disease, keeping people well and intervening when we need to. Chris Whitty's intervention, steering us to identify the 250 academics with a clinical interest who could take forward these pathways of care, will be an absolute centerpiece of how we move forward. And lastly, speaking well of each other. No dark side, no light side, just one side. The third area of the 4 recommendations related to setting direction. And this was a throwing down of the gauntlet to the previous government and to the current one to say we're going to have to choose some major pathways that we can rally around. The patients, the third sector, the National Health Service, our colleagues in regulation, all working together to see if we can really tackle early detection in cancer, material and very distressing challenges around mental health. And then to deliver that vision, to deliver those major missions, we've got to get the national infrastructure sorted out, much tighter oversight and coordination of all of the partners around the table. And then lastly, Nobel Prizes are not won in Whitehall. Nobel Prizes and great developments happen in clusters with communities of people coming together, bringing their expertise around the coffee table or in the sequencing of DNA in the pub in Cambridge over a pint of Green King beer. So the 4th bucket of recommendations related to mobilizing our clusters, our geographies, Manchester, Newcastle, South Yorkshire to be the places where you can do business, where we're not commissioning things at a national level. We published in November. I'm enormously grateful to the Office for Life Sciences and NHS England, to Ros Campion and Vinda Walker for taking those recommendations forward into the sector plan for life sciences and into the 10-year plan for the NHS. We await what happens with that, but when we invite the Treasury to Cambridge, as we did 2 weeks ago, we're saying, you better back it. We've all written it. Okay. So we published this report in November, December of last year. And in conversations since then, I've sensed and felt personally a sort of growing sense of unease from the elation of getting this thing over the line to then a sense that this was necessary, but probably not sufficient. To a sense that perhaps we were just tinkering and tweaking at the edges. When I've got that 84-year-old lady in Red Cross Lane, and I've got backlogs of elective care and a tidal wave of early detection in cancer coming at me. So a number of us have been reflecting on what's happened with those major interventions that have changed the world. Not just in life sciences and healthcare, but the introduction of the railways, the provision of clean water. What have been the characteristics of those big jumps forward? And another way of thinking about this is, what's the style, what's the approach we need to solve these problems? And the most striking thing for me today from the forum was the mind-bending complexity of what we're trying to wrestle with. From the far ends of discovery science and the mechanism of disease to major societal change. At 9 o'clock, 1 o'clock, and 4 o'clock today, a team in Cambridge University hospitals gather to see how many beds are available and how many patients are going home. And between those times, they're calling community services, they're calling people's daughters and sons, they're making sure that the drugs are available to get people home. That's a management and a small team leadership challenge. When I go and have breakfast with Sally Davis at Trinity College, and I walk into her extraordinary office in Trinity in Cambridge, she has 3 desks. And there's a desk devoted to antimicrobial resistance, and there's a desk devoted to the college, and there's a desk devoted to something else. I was taken past the AMR desk to the desk for something else. But when I talk to Sally about AMR, she's talking about tackling the ignored enzyme that could be the next generation of AMR as an element of discovery science, but she's talking about a societal challenge. There are policy challenges, financial challenges, and all of us as leaders will recognize when we have to deploy different skills and techniques. So if I look at this challenge, This challenge for us to deliver economic growth and to deliver changes to the way that we look after people is partly a scientific challenge, but to really let us jump forward, it's a political and a diplomatic challenge. It's a challenge of will and leadership. And when I say political challenge, I don't mean ministerial backing. I mean the skills of a politician, of a diplomat, to bring together multiple competing interests and get to yes. And that will involve all of us giving and getting as we move forward. This is a political challenge. So as I draw to a close, Munir and Bruno, I have enormous hope for where things could go. But building on that central piece of political leadership, diplomatic leadership, working together, there are two other themes I would leave you with. The first relates to platforms. That's the railways, that's the clean water. And the platforms I'm talking about in this unbelievably complex environment are the things that will enable many of you in this room to come up with those next sets of interventions. That is data. That is time. That is genomics. That is artificial intelligence. And that's where we should be bearing down collectively. The second piece for us to really think through is people. And when I say people, I primarily mean our patients. Not trite engagement and sharing the document with them. I mean genuinely renewing and changing the compact we have with the people that I'm certainly here to serve, and I know many of you are doing exactly that as well. And the clinicians and academics and scientists and industry colleagues who could bring things to bear in terms of how we move things forward. As I finish, I recently read two very powerful books. One was Ezra Klein's Abundance, which many of you will have seen, and the other is I reread Prisoners of Geography. Now, in Prisoners of Geography, you can identify parts of the world that face real geographical challenges, the waterfalls that prevent transport up and down their rivers. But this country doesn't just have the physical rivers, the accessible coastline, the temperate climate. It has all the assets that we need to be able to thrive. It's a leadership, a political, and a will challenge to make those things work together. And Ezra Klein's book dots between the failure of liberalism and consensus building, meaning that we're not able to move forward, and the leap to the strongman politics that we're seeing in some parts of the world, but offers hope that building consensus and working together with the give and the get will deliver just the sorts of breakthroughs we were hearing about today. I'm incredibly excited to be here. I can't wait to see the prizes that have been awarded and hearing the stories that sit behind those. A huge thank you. Enjoy the rest of your evening. Thank you.